Alright mates, how's it going? In today's video, chapter 24 of Illidan by William King. Illidan's off to Argus, sort of. So let's go! The Throne of Kil'jaeden, a pretty significant mountain. Gul'dan himself had chosen the name, and it was this very place where he convinced the Orc clans to drink the blood of Manaroth, and thus enslaved them to the Burning Legion's will. On every boulder, every ledge, was a demon hunter, standing guard. They'd driven the demons in the area away, but there was every chance that the ritual Illidan was about to perform would draw the attention of more of them, and Illidan would be vulnerable whilst in his trance state. They were taking a pretty big risk here, but it was a necessary risk. Tonight was the night. Conditions were perfect. It was business time. Illidan had another little look-see at the disc he'd taken from Nathrazar, and once again, his mind was filled with images of the demon lords of the Burning Legion. Sargeras, Archimonde, Kil'jaeden, and he couldn't help but wonder who he was to set himself against that awful trio. He then walked the edge of the great pattern he'd inscribed on the ground, checked the wards, made sure everything was correct and stuff. At the back of his mind, he felt like maybe he was procrastinating a little bit. That window of opportunity would soon close, and another would not arise for a whole bunch of moons. And yet, he couldn't make himself take the final step for some reason. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that if all went to plan, he would soon be gazing directly at those with the power to destroy him completely, and he'd be on his own as well. Look at what happened to Nazul, for example. The shaman had turned against his demonic masters and paid the ultimate price. Maybe this was all just a game for the demon lords, and Illidan was just being an idiot, thinking he could take them on. But whatevs. Before he could stop himself or regret the decision, Illidan then spoke the final words of the spell. A tidal wave of power was unleashed, tearing his spirit from his body, and off he went, tumbling headlong into the twisting nether. And a short time later, he found himself staring down at the planet Argus. He drifted down towards the surface of the world, and as he drew closer, he realised it must have been beautiful once. Crystalline mountains and shimmering seas. But now it looked bloody awful. It was dark and shit. The disc pulsed in his claws. It wasn't the real one. That was still back with his actual body. This was merely a representation of it. But it was trying to lead him towards that which he sought. The tug was almost irresistible, but Illidan fought against it, because first he wanted to try and figure out where this planet actually was in the cosmos. He desperately tried to see some familiar signs in the sky, constellations, magical energy tides. Everything he saw, he made note of, stored it in his mind bank. Might come in handy later on. The disc in his hand continued to pulse impatiently, but for a moment, Illidan felt like he could sense a presence observing him. And that led to a particularly disturbing thought popping into his head. Did Kil'jaeden know he was here? But there was no point worrying about that now. It was too late anyway. He was committed. He finally allowed the pull of the disc to lead him, and as his spirit passed over some jagged mountains, he saw a city. At the centre of that city stood a mighty palace, and within that palace lurked a massive ominous presence, surrounded by slightly smaller ominous presences. And that was where the disc wanted him to go. Great. As he reached the palace, he sensed another presence close by, studying him. But it was as shielded as he was. He waited for a bit, but nothing happened, so he just moved on. He passed through the palace's corridors, past runes that glowed with evil significance, and as he studied them, feelings of rage and despair filled his mind. Here, written in runes of fire, was the creed of the Burning Legion. This was what he was looking for, an anchor for the gateway between Outland and Argus. So, Illidan invoked the final phase of his spell, and the disc pulsed again, absorbing energies from all around, strengthening its connection to this place even further. However, dark energies then began to permeate his astral form, and a heaviness flowed through him. For all his precautions, he had become trapped in a web of some terrible energy. Illidan desperately tried to fight against whatever was happening, but that didn't really work. He had absolutely no control over the fact that his spirit was now being dragged into a vast room, where Kil'jaeden sat surrounded by his court of demons, and the Demon Lord could definitely sense something. However, Illidan then suddenly sensed the other mysterious presence he'd felt earlier, and the Deceiver, who had been looking in Illidan's direction, then just looked away. Whatever this other presence was, it was helping him. Illidan's spirit then floated back out of the throne room, and the dark energies and heaviness and stuff kind of faded away. "Begone from this place. You cannot survive here." The voice spoke inside Illidan's head, and for a short moment he gained a sense of whatever it was, a being of light. But the next thing Illidan knew, his spirit was yanked all the way back to Outland into his physical form. After a second or two of regaining his bearings and shiz, Illidan looked at the real disc in his real hand. It was glowing bright crimson, which meant he'd bloody done it. He'd confirmed that Kil'jaeden was indeed on Argus, He'd found the beating heart of the Burning Legion, and he'd found something else. A being that had aided him to escape when all seemed lost. Although he wasn't entirely sure he trusted that thing, Kil'jaeden was known as the Deceiver after all, so that could well be a trap. And we're leaving it there! That got a bit intense. Or as intense as a story can be, even though we already know what happens to Illidan. In the next video, Illidan does a full-on monologue which may cause some permanent damage to my vocal cords, so I'm really excited about that. As usual, link in the description if you're interested in buying this book. Also, there's links to my Discord server and my Patreon page too. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!